the moment the front door clicked shut behind her. I felt it, an icy thread tightening around my chest. My granddaughter, little Nia, perched on the edge of the worn sofa, didn't move at first. Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve, her gaze fixed on the carpet as if it held secrets. And then, as soon as the sound of her stepmother's footsteps faded down the hall, she tilted her head and whispered my name. I froze. Nia had been silent for years, refusing words for reasons I'd never fully understood. But now, in that trembling, fragile voice, she said something that made my heart lurch.
Grandma, they're taking you.
I clutched the edge of the sofa, my knees weakening. What do you mean, baby? I asked, my voice shaking. They're stealing everything, she said, her words spilling out faster now that the fear had pushed them free. The house, your money, everything, and they don't care. My mind raced, connecting dots. I had been too polite, too trusting, too tired to see. My lawyer, the one I had trusted to protect the life I built, was hiding things from me. My accountant had been manipulating accounts for years. And Nia's stepmother, the woman who smiled like family but spoke like a predator behind closed doors, had been quietly helping them all along. I sank onto the couch beside Nia, holding her hands as if her small fingers could anchor me to reality. How do you know? I asked. She shook her head.
I watch. I listen. I hear what they think I don't.
Her eyes glimmered with a mix of fear and determination that felt far too grown for her age.
They're going to take it all tonight.
The words hit me like a fist. A lifetime of careful planning, of quiet endurance, of keeping my family safe, could vanish in a single night if I didn't act. And yet, as the panic surged, so did something else. A flicker of fire. A spark that told me I could fight back. I had lived through storms like this before. I could do it again, but this time I would be smarter. I pressed my forehead to hers. Thank you, I whispered, tears burning my cheeks. You just saved me. Nia's lips curved into a small, serious smile. She didn't fully understand the danger, but she knew it mattered. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't waste a second. Tonight, I would start unraveling the lies. Tonight, I would show them that age didn't mean weakness. By morning, I would have a plan. By nightfall, I would make them regret thinking they could manipulate and take everything. And the ones who thought they could steal my life, who thought a child's voice didn't matter, they had no idea what was coming. You want to see how a quiet little girl and her grandmother turned betrayal into justice? Stay with me. This story is just beginning. The house was silent once the stepmother's car disappeared down the gravel driveway. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and fast, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Nia sat beside me, her small hand clenched tightly in mine. I could feel her fear, sharp and pure, but I could also feel the flicker of courage she had given me. I wasn't just a grandmother anymore. I was someone who had to act. I stood and moved to the window, peering into the shadows that hugged the edges of the yard. My house, my sanctuary, felt vulnerable for the first time. I had spent decades building this life. Every brick, every account, every memory painstakingly protected. And now, people I had trusted were trying to erase it. Grandma, Nia whispered, tugging on my sleeve.
I saw her. The papers, she was hiding them.
My heart lurched. The stepmother, in her quiet, insidious way, had already begun manipulating documents, forging signatures, and calling in favors from people I thought were friends. My stomach twisted. There was no time to waste. I had to act with precision, like a chess player moving pieces toward an inevitable checkmate. I guided Nia to the small desk in the corner where I kept my personal files, the ones I had never let anyone touch. Show me, I said. Her small fingers fumbled over a stack of papers she had pulled from a drawer she knew I never checked. There were statements, contracts, and letters, some forged, some real, but all pointed toward a single truth. The stepmother and my lawyer had been plotting to take control of my finances. My blood ran cold, and yet my mind sharpened. Fear could freeze you, but it could also focus you. "We have to be careful," I said, lowering my voice. "They're dangerous, and they won't hesitate to cover their tracks." Nia nodded solemnly, the serious look on her little face almost too much for my heart to hold. But I felt a fierce pride. Even in her silence, she had found a way to speak the truth, to alert me to the danger I had ignored for far too long. I spent the next hour gathering every piece of evidence I could find: bank statements, emails, and notes I had kept over the years. Each one was a thread, and together they formed a tapestry of betrayal I could use against them. The plan began to take shape in my mind. First, expose them. Then, reclaim what was mine. And finally, make them understand the cost of underestimating me. As midnight approached, the house seemed to hold its breath with me. Nia had fallen asleep on the couch, her small chest rising and falling in rhythm with mine. I watched her for a moment, my mind racing. She had saved me once tonight, but this was only the beginning. The game had started, and I could feel the pieces moving beneath my fingers. Tomorrow, I would make the first move. They believed I was weak. That age had dulled my senses. They were wrong. The fire in my veins, the determination in my heart, was more dangerous than they could imagine. And when they realized what I had discovered, when they saw the trap I was setting, they would regret every deceitful word, every hidden signature, every cruel smile. Tonight, the silence of my house was not peace. It was preparation. And soon, the storm would come. The sun hadn't yet risen when I slipped from the bedroom, careful not to wake Nia. The house was still wrapped in that fragile quiet that makes every creak sound like a warning. I needed to act before the stepmother returned, before she could undo even more of the work I had painstakingly uncovered. Every second counted. I moved to my desk and spread the documents across the polished surface. Statements, letters, emails, all of them formed a map of deceit, and I traced each line with my finger, imagining what I was about to do. My heart raced, but my hands were steady. I had spent a lifetime learning patience, reading people, calculating every risk. Tonight, that experience would become my weapon. The first target was the lawyer, a man who smiled like a friend while counting my money in secret. He visited every week under the guise of checking accounts and signatures, thinking I was too old to notice. I needed proof that would tie him directly to the theft, a signature and a forged approval there. I slipped on my coat and hat, masking the gray hair and careful features that had long convinced the world I was fragile. Outside, the street was empty, save for the early birds and the occasional rumble of a delivery truck. I moved quietly to the lawyer's office a few blocks away, a modest brick building that seemed harmless. But I knew the interior told a different story. Drawers full of falsified records, a safe holding the evidence of years of betrayal. I had no intention of breaking in recklessly. No, I had learned long ago that haste is a fool's mistake. Instead, I relied on observation, timing, and subtlety. I waited until the janitor unlocked the door, greeting him with a warm smile that concealed the steel in my eyes. "Good morning," I said, leaning lightly on the counter. "I just wanted to drop a document. The usual." The man nodded, distracted. I slipped past, claiming I was merely dropping off paperwork. Once inside, I moved quickly, but carefully, glancing at file cabinets and the safe behind the receptionist's desk. My instincts told me which drawer would hold what I needed. Minutes passed, but I didn't rush. I jotted a note in my mind, The files labeled trust contained everything. Their arrogance blinded them to the obvious. I knew their patterns, their complacency, and I could turn that against them. Back home, I reviewed my mental notes. Everything aligned perfectly. I could now track the stepmother's movements, anticipate the lawyer's next visits, and gather undeniable proof. And Nia was more than my warning system. She was my eyes in the house when I couldn't be there, alerting me to every suspicious sound, every secret glance. By late afternoon, the stepmother returned, humming as if nothing were wrong. I greeted her calmly, letting no hint of my discoveries slip. She smiled, a rehearsed sweet expression, and I mirrored it. Inside, my mind was working a dozen steps ahead. Each move she made, each word she uttered, I cataloged it for later. When she left to run errands, I didn't waste a second. I reviewed my documents, checked the accounts she had tampered with, and noted every forged signature. Each one was a thread I would pull until the entire web collapsed around her. And then I thought of Nia, asleep on the couch, innocent but wise beyond her years. Without her courage, I might never have uncovered the truth. I pressed my hand to my chest and whispered a silent promise. I would protect her. I would reclaim what was mine, and I would make every person who betrayed me feel the weight of their greed. Tomorrow, I would strike again, subtly but unmistakably. The game had begun, and I could feel the tension tightening like a wire. Every step, every breath, every careful glance brought me closer to the moment when justice would be unavoidable. By the third day, I could feel her confidence growing. That was the danger. People make their worst mistakes when they believe the outcome is already decided. Nia's stepmother moved through my home like she owned it, opening drawers without asking, lingering near my desk, pretending concern while quietly measuring how much time I had left before everything became hers. That morning, she brought me tea I hadn't asked for. "You look tired," she said softly, placing the cup near my hand. "All this stress can't be good for you." I smiled back, slow and gentle, the way people expect a woman my age to smile when she's being managed instead of cared for. 72 will do that to you," I replied. Her lips twitched, just for a second. It was the kind of smile that wasn't meant to be seen. Nia sat on the floor nearby, drawing silently. Her eyes flicked up, then back down. She didn't speak, but she didn't miss anything. Neither did I. Later that afternoon, the lawyer arrived unannounced. That alone told me everything. He never came without notice unless he believed he was running out of time. I watched him from the hallway mirror as he smoothed his tie and glanced at his watch, already impatient.
"We need to finalize a few things. Just routine."
I took the papers, pretending to squint. So many pages. You know, my eyes aren't what they used to be. He leaned forward, voice lowering.
"That's why it's better to sign now, before things get complicated."
Behind him, Nia sat very still. Of course. Let me get my glasses. Instead, I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I'd hidden a recorder, small and silent. I slipped it into my pocket and returned, placing it well hidden. "Read it to me," I said. "I want to understand." The lawyer hesitated, just a beat too long. Then he began explaining clauses that stripped control from my accounts and transferred authority to a trustee I had never approved. Each word dug deeper, and I let him talk. People like him always reveal too much when they think they're winning. When he finished, I folded my hands. "And the house?" I asked. He cleared his throat.
"Temporary relocation would be best. A care facility. Until things settle."
"I see," I said quietly. I saw a slight grin on his face. That night, after they left, Nia spoke again.
She lied, Grandma, about the phone call.
I sat beside her. "Which one?"
She told someone you wouldn't remember signing.
My chest tightened, but my voice stayed calm. Thank you for telling me. I didn't sleep much. Instead, I organized everything. Recordings, copies, dates, times. I made calls of my own, careful ones, to people who owed me favors from years long past. People who knew how quietly things could be handled when the truth was undeniable. By dawn, the trap was set. They thought they were pushing me toward a signature. What they didn't realize was that every step they took closer was sealing their own fate. And the next move would force them into the open, whether they were ready or not. I waited 2 days before making my move. Not because I was afraid, but because patience unsettles guilty people more than confrontation ever could. Silence gives them room to imagine consequences. And imagination, when fed by fear, does most of the work for you. Nia stayed close to me during that time. She didn't speak unless necessary, but her presence grounded me. She watched doors, listened for voices, and noticed things adults dismissed. I trusted her instincts completely now. Whatever danger was coming, we would face it together. Early that morning, I made a phone call from the landline. I wanted it recorded somewhere official, somewhere they couldn't erase. My voice sounded calm, almost pleasant. I'd like to review my financial oversight. Independently, there was a pause on the other end, a shift. I could hear the tension creep into the silence. That won't be necessary. The voice replied carefully. Everything is already handled. Then you won't mind an audit. The call ended shortly after that. By noon, the stepmother was pacing. She pretended to clean, wiping already spotless counters, opening cabinets without purpose. Her phone buzzed constantly. Each time, she stepped outside to answer, lowering her voice as if walls couldn't hear guilt. That evening, she tried a different tactic.
You've seemed confused lately. Maybe it's time we talked about extra care. Just until things calm down. Nia would be worried if anything happens to you.
I looked directly at her. I'm perfectly clear. Her smile tightened. Across the room, Nia's eyes never left her face. Later that night, the lawyer called. This time, his voice lacked its usual confidence.
There's been a complication. Some irregularities flagged.
That's strange. I replied. I assumed everything was routine. Silence stretched between us. We should meet, he said. Tomorrow, I agreed. Bring every document. After the call ended, I allowed myself a slow breath. The first crack had appeared. That night, Nia sat beside me on the bed, knees drawn to her chest. They're scared, she said quietly. Yes, I answered. And scared people rush. She nodded as if filing the thought away. The next morning, I placed copies of everything into labeled folders. Not just for evidence, but for control. Organization is power. Truth, when presented cleanly, leaves no room for excuses. Before leaving the house, I locked my bedroom door. I hadn't done that in years. When I returned that afternoon, something was off. A drawer slightly ajar. Papers shifted. Someone had been searching. I didn't confront her. I didn't react at all. Instead, I made another call. This one was to a woman I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. A woman who understood betrayal and who never forgot a favor. I need someone to watch, I said. She didn't ask questions. I'll handle it. That evening, the stepmother acted unusually kind. Too kind. She offered dessert, asked about my childhood, laughed at stories she'd heard before. Predators often soften their tone before they strike. I tucked Nia into bed early. No matter what you hear tonight, I whispered, you stay here, Dot. She nodded, eyes serious. After midnight, I heard footsteps outside my door. Slow, careful. I sat upright, heart steady, recorder already in my hand. They believed I was alone. They were wrong. and whatever they planned to do next would finally give me everything I needed to end this. The footsteps outside my door didn't stop. Slow, careful, calculated. Whoever it was thought I would be asleep. But I had learned long ago that patience is the deadliest weapon. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let them inch closer, believing they were the hunters. When the doorknob rattled slightly, I pressed the recorder to my chest and whispered to Nia, who was tucked quietly under the blanket on the couch, "Stay calm. Watch and listen." She nodded, small and tense, her eyes wide in the dark. The door opened, almost imperceptibly. And then I recognized the movements. The stepmother, cautious, checking if the house was empty. And behind her, someone else, a man moving too carefully to be a stranger. My chest tightened. It had to be him, Nia's father. The realization struck me. He had been part of this from the start. From the moment my daughter died, he had married her, allowed this woman into their lives, and quietly worked against me. Every misplaced signature, every delay, every concern about my health, it all made sense now. They hadn't just been greedy, they had been patient, orchestrating years of betrayal. I held my breath as they crept toward the desk, thinking I was asleep. The stepmother's fingers grazed the edges of my papers, rifling through them with overconfident precision. The father hovered behind her, whispering instructions, the sound of his voice enough to confirm his complicity. I pressed a button on the recorder. It was small, silent, but it captured everything. Their whispers, their plans, the way they assumed I was powerless. Every lie they had spun for years was laid bare in that one recording. And then I spoke. Calmly, softly, looking for something. The stepmother froze. Her face lost the rehearsed sweetness she always wore. The father's jaw tightened, and for a moment I saw panic flicker behind his eyes. They had underestimated me, thought fear would make me compliant. I rose slowly, holding the recorder in plain sight. Every signature you forged, every account you manipulated, every plan to move me out of my home, they're all documented. The stepmother tried to laugh, but it came out brittle.
You can't prove.
I just did. I said, my voice calm, deliberate. And the person who warned me? My granddaughter. Silent, observant, brave. Do you remember her? The one you thought too quiet to notice anything. Nia's small voice broke the tense silence.
They were lying. About everything.
The room felt smaller suddenly. Their arrogance, their patience, all collapsed under the weight of the truth. I could see it in the father's face. I could see it in hers. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to strike. The first trap had sprung, and it had caught both of them completely. Tonight I had evidence, witnesses, and the advantage. I would turn this into something irreversible. And a grandmother they thought fragile, had every intention of seeing them undone. Morning came without relief. Light slipped through the curtains as if nothing had happened, as if two people hadn't stood in my bedroom hours earlier trying to erase me. I stayed seated on the edge of the bed long after the house settled, listening to the rhythm of my own breathing, letting the night's truth settle into something solid and usable. They didn't speak to me at breakfast. That silence told me more than any confession could have. The stepmother avoided my eyes, busying herself with the sink, while Nia's father sat rigid at the table, hands folded, jaw clenched. He had always filled space with words. Now he had none. Guilt does that. It steals confidence first. Nia stayed close. She didn't eat much, just watched. She noticed how her father flinched when I set my cup down. She noticed how the stepmother checked her phone repeatedly, stepping into the hallway to answer calls she thought I couldn't hear. That child missed nothing. I behaved as though the night had passed unnoticed. That choice mattered. Fear would have confirmed their assumptions. Calm created uncertainty. I folded laundry. I watered plants. I asked if anyone wanted more coffee. The normalcy unsettled them far more than anger ever could. By mid-morning, the stepmother broke.
You should rest today. After everything you've been through.
I met her gaze. I slept just fine. Her fingers tightened around the counter. She nodded once and turned away. I saw it then, the shift. She wasn't in control anymore. She was reacting. That was my opening. I didn't confront them. I didn't threaten. Instead, I moved quietly through the house, collecting what they thought they had hidden well. I photographed documents. I copied account numbers. I transferred recordings to a second device. When Nia's father finally spoke, his voice lacked authority. "We need to talk," he said. "Yes," I replied. "We do." I chose the living room. Open space. No corners. No advantage. He sat across from me, hands trembling despite his effort to steady them. The stepmother lingered near the doorway, listening.
"You're misunderstanding things."
I held up the recorder. He stopped. "I heard you last night. Both of you." The stepmother stepped forward.
You think you did. But recordings can be misinterpreted.
"That's true," I said, which is why I made copies. Her face drained of color. I stood slowly, my joints stiff but my resolve firm. "You've mistaken my patience for confusion. You believed silence meant ignorance. You were wrong." Nia spoke then, her voice quiet but steady. "You said Grandma wouldn't remember." Her father looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Not as a child, as a witness. That was the moment everything shifted. I didn't accuse. I didn't raise my voice. I let the truth sit between us, heavy and undeniable. Lies need energy to survive. Truth does not. They left the house shortly after, claiming errands, urgency, unfinished business. I let them go. Desperate people rush toward mistakes. When the door closed behind them, I picked up the phone and made a call I should have made years ago. "I'm ready," I said. The voice on the other end didn't hesitate. "Then I'll be there." Nia looked up at me. "Is it going to stop now?" I squeezed her hand. "It has already started." That day wasn't about revenge. It was about control. And by nightfall, I had it. They just didn't know it yet. By dusk, I could feel it. The tension lingering in the hallways, in the faint creak of the floorboards, in the way the stepmother lingered near doors, checking behind her, as if she expected someone. That someone was here. Our ally arrived, quietly, slipping into the house through the side entrance, while the stepmother and father were distracted. She moved without noise, her presence almost invisible, and settled in a spot where she could see the study and the hallway. Trained eyes, patience like mine. She didn't speak. She only observed. I stayed in the living room with Nia, sipping tea as if nothing unusual was happening. She leaned against my side, eyes wide but calm. "They're acting strange," she whispered. "Yes," I replied. "And that's exactly what we need." The stepmother paced, carefully rifling through drawers, checking the very papers I had photographed and organized earlier. She thought she was covering tracks. The father hovered behind her, whispering directions. They had no idea that someone else was watching, recording, analyzing their every motion. A small, nearly silent click echoed from the corner of the study. I didn't flinch. I knew what it was. Our ally had triggered a hidden camera I had positioned weeks before, capturing their actions without detection. I set my teacup down slowly. "Looking for something?" I asked, loud enough for them to hear. The stepmother froze. Her hand lingered over a folder she had meant to hide. The father stiffened, caught off guard. They both turned toward me, faces pale. "You've been careful," I said softly, but not careful enough. I nodded toward the shadows where the ally remained unseen. Some mistakes can't be erased once they're witnessed. The stepmother swallowed hard. I didn't. You did, I said. Every document moved, every signature altered. The proof is already safe, and it's only going to get more complete. The father's face twisted in panic. Do not finish that sentence. I warned. Every word you utter can be used against you, and someone is listening, recording, watching. The stepmother glanced around, realizing the impossibility of escape. They were trapped by the house, by their own greed, and now by an ally who had studied them as carefully as I had. I let them stew in the tension. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a threat. The weight of the truth was heavier than any yell, and it pressed against them like a wall they could not climb. By midnight, I could hear their footsteps retreating, hurried, panicked. They were scrambling, trying to regain control, but the first irreversible mistake had already been set in motion. They had been exposed to a witness, and now every move would be watched. Nia curled up next to me. "Are we safe now?" she whispered. I stroked her hair. "For tonight," I said, "but tomorrow we will tighten the net, and they will have nowhere left to hide." I looked at the ally, hidden in the corner. A small nod passed between us. Quiet, deliberate, effective. Together, we were a force they had never counted on, a grandmother, a child, and one patient, watchful ally. And in that stillness, I knew with certainty the reckoning had begun. The house hummed with quiet tension. Footsteps echoed softly through the hallway, not in rhythm but in hesitation. The stepmother moved like a predator on edge, eyes darting toward doors and corners she had never questioned before. I stayed in the living room with Nia, my hands folded in my lap, letting the calm settle over us like a shield. Our ally watched from the shadows, a silent observer of the chaos that was about to unfold. She had studied their habits, anticipated every misstep, and now she simply waited for the moment when their own insecurities would betray them. I moved deliberately around the room, casually stacking papers in a corner, as though tidying up. Every movement was measured. Every gesture was intended to seed doubt. Nia, seated on the couch beside me, followed my eyes and whispered, "Grandma?" He's looking at her like he doesn't trust her. I smiled faintly. "Exactly, baby, and we'll let that grow." Later, a folded document fell from the corner of the desk and slid across the floor. The father bent down, picking it up without noticing the ally watching him. He examined it closely, frowning, his fingers trembling slightly. The stepmother, noticing his sudden intensity, crept closer. "What is that?" she asked softly. He hesitated, unsure whether to speak. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't quite hear, and I saw the flicker of panic cross her face. Doubt had begun to root itself. She wondered if he had been keeping secrets, if his assurances were lies. And he, in turn, questioned her loyalty. I let the room breathe, letting the tension thicken, while Nia's small hand brushed mine. "They're already arguing," she whispered. "Yes," I said quietly, "and they don't know we're listening." The whispers grew sharper. The father accused, the stepmother denied. Each word fed the other's paranoia. Neither realized that every syllable, every tremor in their voices was being captured, noted, and stored by our allies' discreet devices. I moved to the window, pretending to look outside, while Nia observed their expressions. "Grandma, she's afraid he'll turn against her," she murmured. "Good," I said softly. "Fear makes them reckless." Minutes passed, then hours. The father stormed out suddenly, muttering about trust and mistakes. The stepmother remained, isolated, her hands shaking as she rearranged documents she thought were safe. Their unity had cracked, their carefully constructed alliance now fragile. I leaned back and allowed myself a small smile. Our work was quiet, subtle, and it was working. Nia's eyes gleamed in the dim light, understanding that patience, observation, and clever planning could bend the strongest of wills. The night deepened. The house held its breath, and I knew that in this carefully orchestrated chaos, the first undeniable evidence of their greed and deceit was now within our reach. For the first time, the stepmother and father were fighting themselves, and that fight would expose everything we needed. The house was quieter than usual, but the tension hung thick, like smoke that refused to settle. The stepmother had grown hesitant, checking drawers she had rifled through dozens of times before, double-checking documents she thought she controlled. The father paced, muttering under his breath, each step betraying the uncertainty that had taken root between them. I remained in the living room with Nia, pretending to read a book, my fingers tracing the edge of the pages, as if lost in thought. But my attention never wavered. Every glance, every whisper, every nervous gesture was catalogued in my mind. Our allies stayed in the shadows, poised to observe the consequences of their next moves. It was the perfect moment. I accidentally left a folder on the coffee table, edges just visible. The stepmother noticed it first. Her hand trembled as she reached for it, glancing nervously toward her husband. The father froze. He knew, even if he didn't admit it, that this folder could undo everything they had worked for. Nia whispered from the couch, "Grandma, she's opening it." I didn't respond. I let them proceed. Inside the folder was a single copy of a document the father had assumed hidden, proof of a transferred account, carefully manipulated to make it look like the stepmother was acting alone. She read it quickly, a sharp intake of breath escaping her lips. The father tried to snatch it from her hands, but his hesitation was fatal. He knocked over a small stack of papers, sending receipts, letters, and bank statements spilling across the floor. That noise drew attention from elsewhere in the house. The small camera in the study caught everything. The ally recorded every motion, every reaction, every word. The stepmother's panic intensified. You left this? How could you?" she hissed, glancing at her husband. He stammered, realizing that in the moment of confusion, he had exposed their coordination. His previous confidence evaporated. I thought." "You thought what?" I said, rising slowly and walking toward them. Calm, deliberate, that I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't prepare. The folder fell to the floor between us. Both adults stared at it, frozen. The room felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were aware of their betrayal. Nia, quietly observing, whispered again, "They're trapped, Grandma." "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "And this time, there's no turning back." The father's shoulders slumped. The stepmother's hands shook. They had made their first major misstep, one they could not undo. Every document, every plan, every secret they had relied on was now exposed. Our ally stepped forward from the shadows, a subtle nod confirming the success of our strategy. I looked at Nia, who gave a small, satisfied smile. She understood that courage isn't loud. It's deliberate. It's patient. And tonight it had worked. The house settled into silence again, but the air was different. The balance had shifted. The first irreversible move had been made, and the path toward justice was now unavoidable. The air was heavy with quiet fury. I moved through the house as though nothing had changed, but everything had. The stepmother's nervous glances, the father's stiff movements, the subtle trembling of their hands. Each told me that the balance of power had shifted. I didn't need to act immediately. I let them stew, letting their own fear and confusion guide their behavior. That first mistake, the folder on the coffee table, had opened a crack. My role now was simple. Widen it. I called the lawyer, my voice calm, deliberate. There are discrepancies that need immediate review, I said. I would like to schedule a meeting tomorrow morning. He paused, hesitating. Of course, he said. I'll prepare everything. Good. Hesitation was a weakness I could exploit. The stepmother moved through the living room, tidying as if to restore order, but her movements were anxious. She avoided eye contact, muttered under her breath, and checked her phone repeatedly. The father hovered nearby, attempting authority, but every word rang hollow. Their alliance was fraying, and I was watching the threads unravel. Nia perched beside me, quietly observing. She leaned close. Grandma, they're watching each other more than us. I smiled faintly. Exactly. And that's how we win. They've become their own enemies. I allowed a subtle accidental display. A small stack of photographs, documents, and recordings left in plain sight. I didn't point, I didn't speak. Their eyes found it. Panic flickered in the stepmother's expression, and the father's jaw tightened. They saw the evidence, but didn't yet understand its completeness. Our ally, stationed in the study, recorded every interaction, every whispered accusation, every subtle gesture. They thought themselves clever, but the allies' presence made their every misstep permanent. By evening, the tension reached a new peak. The stepmother attempted to remove the papers she feared would expose her, fumbling in her haste. The father tried to intervene, each movement clumsy, each attempt revealing more than concealing. I watched quietly, letting their actions betray them. Nia's small hand brushed mine. Grandma, they're trapped in their own lies. Yes, I whispered. And soon, we'll show them there's no escape. I let them stew until nightfall. Their paranoia had grown into frenzy, and the first irreversible mistake had already begun to spiral. The ally remained hidden, but ready, ensuring no action went unnoticed. Every whispered accusation, every attempt to regain control, only deepened the pit they had dug for themselves. Tonight, I didn't need to confront them. I didn't need threats. I only needed patience, observation, and timing. By tomorrow morning, the advantage would be undeniable. And when that moment came, I would act decisively. The house had become a minefield, and they were stepping into it without knowing it. Every glance the stepmother threw at her husband betrayed distrust. Every hurried movement exposed fear. I moved through the living room quietly, folding a blanket as if nothing had changed, but I felt the shift in the air. Control was mine, and they were unaware. I placed a small stack of documents near the desk, accidentally visible. The stepmother's eyes widened as she noticed them. She reached for them instinctively, and I could see the calculation in her mind, how to remove what she feared would expose her. The father noticed her hand, and suspicion flickered in his eyes. Their alliance, already strained, was beginning to fracture further. Our ally observed from the study doorway, silent and precise. Every glance, every whispered accusation between the pair was captured. Every panic-induced movement would become undeniable proof. The ally was not just watching. She was orchestrating the inevitability of their collapse, nudging them ever closer to revealing their secrets. I whispered to Nia, who sat on the couch, alert and wide-eyed. Watch them. See how their own fear betrays them. Minutes later, the father tried to intercept the stepmother, attempting to seize the documents before she could react. His motion was clumsy, too quick, and in the struggle, several receipts and statements fell across the floor. The stepmother froze, realizing the exposure was worse than she feared. What did you do? She hissed at him, her voice trembling. Nothing, he snapped, though the accusation had already planted doubt in both their minds. I stepped forward slowly, my presence calm and unthreatening. It seems some truths cannot remain hidden, I said softly. You've both been very careful for a long time, but no carefulness can hide everything. The stepmother's hand shook as she tried to gather the fallen papers. The father's face was pale, and for the first time, I saw him unsure, helpless. They were unraveling, not because I confronted them directly, but because I had allowed their own fear and greed to turn them against each other. Nia leaned closer. "Grandma, they're arguing about the papers." "Good," I whispered. "Let them argue. Let them reveal everything. The more they expose themselves, the stronger our position becomes." By the time the night grew deep, the house had transformed into a theater of suspicion. The stepmother and father were no longer partners in deceit. They were two people unraveling in front of the evidence, in front of witnesses, and under the watchful eyes of those who would not allow them to recover. Our ally gave a subtle nod from the shadows, a silent confirmation that the trap was working perfectly. Every movement, every whispered panic had been captured. And tomorrow, I would begin turning this unraveling into something irreversible, something final. Tonight, the first irreversible error had blossomed fully. They were trapped in the web they had spun, and there was no retreat. By morning, the house had shifted. The stepmother moved cautiously, as if treading glass. Her confidence had evaporated. The father paced, restless and jittery, every step betraying the uncertainty that had taken root. Both believed they were still in control, but the truth was simple. They were playing a game they had already lost. I made breakfast, slowly, deliberately, letting the smell of coffee fill the kitchen. Nia sat beside me, alert and observant. "Grandma," they're whispering again. She said quietly, "Yes," I replied. And every whisper is part of what we need. Our ally remained in position, hidden yet fully aware, ready to document every misstep. I had orchestrated the perfect environment, documents partially exposed, recordings strategically placed, and both conspirators under pressure from their own fears. The stepmother tried to approach the desk, eyes flicking nervously to me, and Nia, the father, blocked her path, suspicion written across his face. Their voices dropped to low tones, but the tension radiated through the room. Each word, each gesture, each hesitation became a weapon I could use. I poured myself a cup of coffee, savoring the calm, while Nia watched silently. Then I let a small, deliberate sound escape, a chair scraping slightly against the floor. Both of them froze. "What was that?" the stepmother whispered, glancing at her husband. "I didn't hear anything," he said, though his voice betrayed doubt. I set down the cup and spoke evenly. "It's remarkable how fragile alliances become when trust is gone. Remarkable how quickly people turn against those they once relied on." The stepmother's hands trembled. The father's eyes darted between her and me. Their own misgivings had become a trap. I didn't need to confront them directly. The tension did it for me. Morning light filled the living room, but the air was different, charged, final. The stepmother sat at the edge of the couch, head bowed, trembling. The father leaned against the doorway, defeated, powerless. Their carefully constructed world had crumbled, leaving nothing but the consequences of their own actions. I stood tall, holding Nia's hand. She squeezed mine gently, her eyes bright and alert, the same small witness who had noticed every move, every lie, every betrayal. Today, her courage would help seal the outcome. The lawyer reviewed the documents one last time, nodding gravely. "Everything here is irrefutable," he said. "With this evidence, the authorities and the courts will act immediately. There's no room for dispute." The stepmother lifted her eyes, finally meeting mine. Her rehearsed arrogance was gone, replaced by fear and regret. I didn't think." "You didn't think long enough," I said calmly. "Greed and deceit always have a price. And today you pay it." The father remained silent, staring at the floor. His complicity had been laid bare for everyone to see. There was no explanation, no excuse, no escape. Nia whispered softly, "Grandma, we did it." "Yes, baby," I said, pulling her close. "We did it together. We waited, we watched, and we acted only when the time was right. Courage isn't loud. It's patient and clever, and today it won." Our ally stepped forward, finally visible, a small smile on her face. "They'll be held accountable," she said. "Everything is documented. No chance of evasion." I nodded, letting the weight of the months of planning settle. The stepmother and father had been undone by their own arrogance, their own impatience, and their own mistakes. Their power was gone, replaced by the law, by truth, and by the careful work of those they had underestimated. I looked at Nia, her small hand resting in mine, and felt a surge of pride. "You were brave," I told her. "You noticed what others ignored, spoke when others stayed silent, and gave me the evidence we needed. You helped save us both." The stepmother and father were escorted out by the authorities shortly after, their faces pale, their arguments empty. I closed the door behind them and felt the calm that comes only when justice is finally done. I turned to Nia. "Let's go upstairs. Time for breakfast, for school, for life. The past has been corrected, and we can move forward." She smiled, small but triumphant, and I realized something. Age, silence, and patience are not weaknesses. They are strength when combined with determination and cleverness. Today we had won, not through confrontation, not through threats, but through observation, careful planning, and the courage to wait for the right moment. And now, the house was ours again, safe, honest, and finally at peace. If this story moved you, stay with us. Subscribe for more powerful stories of truth, resilience, and justice, where the quietest voices make the biggest impact. Share this with someone who believes silence is weakness. And remember, sometimes the truth doesn't scream. It waits.